Excellent. So, Liz, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you and I have worked together for a long time at this point,
Yeah,
between the MTA and the School Construction Authority, and so I'm gonna. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience getting into the industry, and your company, and then we'll sort of go from there.
sure. So in I guess a delicious way, I didn't have any choice but to go into this industry, I feel. I grew up in the construction industry, so literally as a young girl growing up, and Mike, I don't know if you know this, but I have six sisters, no brothers, six sisters. So seven girls being raised in a house. I'm the middle child. If I was if I was home, I would probably be doing chores, watching my younger siblings and such. I would go to work with my dad. I loved it. I loved his energy. I loved the idea of building. I saw where we built and what we built. And I remember at the time, it was a lot of federal work because we were in the SBA 8A program. And so I remember going to VA hospitals, FAA, airports, as well as postal service buildings, and just marveling at the built environment. How, I think much later in life I came to put words into what I was feeling, but the ability to kind of build the community around you, was something that was incredibly intoxicating from a very young age. And the fact that we were doing kind of work that had such an impact on communities at large, I think I also felt that it was a special blessing. So from a very early age on, like really like 8, 9, 10 years old, going in, I would sharpen pencils at the office. I would, make copies if I could, do filing, whatever it could be, to just kind of feel like I was part of it. And the fact that my father had started the firm, following being a carpenter, a union carpenter, and he broke his ankle badly. He was convalescing and felt the need to kind of put a shingle out there rather than continue doing labor in the fields, doing carpentry in the fields. For me, it gave me a sense of, as a very young age, ownership too, in terms of what those possibilities could be as being an entrepreneur, as well. Again, those perspectives were kind of honed much later on, but I remember being astounded in the beginning. My father would also encourage his daughters to come to work with him. For us, it was always going to be a good lunch, like a sandwich at a deli rather than something out of the refrigerator at home. And there was always so this kind of spark and kind of excitement. On some projects, I remember distinctly being in my teens, working on a project on Governor's Island for the U.S. Coast Guard. He actually had some of us come in and do the final cleaning. And obviously, that was absolutely not in accordance with wage laws and requirements, age laws and requirements. But we went in and he just told us we were doing such a great job. And he got probably the best price of zero on that final cleaning on that job. Uh,
All that for a good lunch.
all that good for a good lunch. And so from a very young age, I was smitten. When I went to, our office was based in North Belmore, Long Island, and I went to school at Hofstra University, undergrad and grad. And during my undergrad, I would take two buses to go to work because I just I wanted to earn. I've always been wanting to earn money, from a very young age, babysitting and whatnot. But it was allowed me to kind of put into practice some of the stuff I was learning as a young business school student, and earning as well. And it was in my senior year undergrad at Hofstra that a proposal came into our office, and it was an invitation to have what they called neighborhood builders in the community that were of color. That was the unspoken
Mhm.
tagline, become developers of housing. So it was 1989. I was in my senior year. I had already landed a job with Aetna in their bond underwriting department. They liked that I had construction experience. And I wrote this proposal to a woman by the name of Catherine Wild, who is arguably today one of the most powerful women in New York, and possibly the United States. She had a role on the Federal Reserve. She's my mentor to this day. And I wrote this proposal, not knowing how to write a proposal or whatever, just answered the questions, and we won. And so we were selected right out the gate, one of the first firms that were selected to build 64 units of affordable housing in Hunts Point. I'm sorry, in South Bronx. That was our first project. So here I am. It's May. I'm graduating. I'm going on to Aetna because they showed me that I would be able to make a lot more than what I was making with my father. And my father came to me and said, you can't leave yet. You know, I need someone to kind of launch this project for us. And you're it. Just give me 6 months until I can find somebody. I never looked back. It was an amazing opportunity to build housing for first-time home buyers. Those home buyers look like me. I think 90%, all of them were people of color, 90% were Latino. Here I was a girl born in Brooklyn, but really raised in Long Island. And here I am in the South Bronx, really scared to death of being on this project site. It was an empty lot. There were squatters there. You didn't feel like there were police in the area. And I remember I would stay in the car and lock the doors during the site walkthroughs. So once I got involved with kind of the architect selection at this real tender age, 21, 22. And I met people like Preston Tisch from Lowe's Corporation. The Tisches are a big real estate name in New York. Fred Wilpon. I remember having lunch at a table, and Fred Wilpon from Sterling Equities was on one side of me, Preston Tisch was on the other. And I knew at that age, 21, that I should pinch myself that this was not normal, not the normal course of business. For me, it gave me
that's like development royalty in New York.
It was absolutely development royalty, and I was a sponge. I still am to this day. I think, you know, just learned everything. So Kathy Wiles, the intent of the program was to kind of show a developer how to be a developer, how to make a pro forma, how to select an architect, how to get a construction loan, how to get mortgages because the homes were going right into first-time home ownership, how to advocate, talk in the evenings to community groups to drum up interest in buying a house. There was overwhelming interest at that time, and still really to this day, for those kind of programs. And I was hooked, never looked back, just dove straight in. Absolutely loved the experience of being able to provide housing for families. Was just great. We ended up building, all told, about 600 units of housing throughout different places in the Bronx and in Manhattan. While we were going through this real interesting expansion and development phase for the company, because we were a carpentry contractor as well as a general contractor at the time, doing work at VA hospitals and such. I had a keen sense that I was taking the company, and my father really kind of fanned those flames to kind of take the company into a stronger and different direction, right? You know, putting more eggs in our basket, if you will. And I remember meeting with the bankers and other folks just in terms of complicated development deals. And my father saying something to me, and it's something he said many times. And I think it just kind of forms as this young girl is coming into this rough and tumble, risky industry of construction. My father would say to me, construction is no place for a woman. And he said that many times to me. And it was never something that I took seriously. I don't know why. It was my father saying it to me. I would kind of laugh it off. And it wasn't until much later, Mike, as we get older, we go back and we look at our lives and try and figure out what brought us to where we are in any one period of time. And I think he was really trying to protect me at the time. Here I was, the face of the company in so many ways, going out into uncertain territory that was tremendously male dominated. And I think he was trying to just kind of, you know, set me up in case of failure. And the great news was that, failure never really came, which was great.
Yeah.
I didn't see bounds. And I was able to grow and really expand the company in a big way. And
So let me ask you a question about that,
yeah,
because fast forwarding 30 years, right? Because
yeah,
that's about 30 years ago.
yeah.
Um, what was it that was successful for you as a woman in a male populated industry, right? Back then it was, right now we're a 90-10 industry. Back then it was
Yes.
probably a 98-2 industry, right? Or somewhere along those lines. So what was it for you that allowed you to be successful?
I
That
think it was a couple of things. I think having a formal education, I went on to get my MBA. I think I took maybe a year off in between and went on to get my MBA at night. I think I felt empowered because I had that formal education. I think I felt empowered because um, I think my parents both raised kind of very strong women. And I think I was fearless in many ways. Doesn't mean I didn't see things, and doesn't mean I still don't see things. It was not only was it's 1 in 10 now, as you were saying, but if you're a woman of color, it's half that number.
oh yeah,
That's the national statistics right now. Back then was probably exacerbated, right? Even more. So not only was there um, I think some kind of rampant misogyny, and it still exists to this day. I know we'll get into that, but there was also racial bias as well. And I kind of can fit into any kind of mode. If you look at me, I can be almost anything, right? But I've always kept Velez as my last name. Uh, and being Latina is part of who I am, part of what I think gives me this kind of strength of character. And so I always wore it on my sleeve, right? I always wore being a woman and being true to myself. That's my grandmother in me, my father's mother, who was a business owner as well. And so I think I was probably from a very young age well equipped for kind of the twists and turns and risks and those kind of barriers to entry um, to be equipped for it.
yeah.
My father was definitely pushing me also, from behind and in front, and he was running interference for me as well. I think we had conversations. He passed away in 2019, but we had conversations all through the time that we worked together. And, that was like 25 years. It was wonderful. We became partners in so many regards. That was something that grew over time. And I think for him, he would just marvel. Unfortunately, he passed before I became chair of the building Congress. I think for him would have been a real crowning achievement.
Sure.
I actually think he would have just been incredibly tickled to know that I was selected to be on the MTA board, because for some reason he was fascinated by the MTA board and the personalities and people that were on it and the importance of the
Yeah.
agency. And so that
So
was
so
all stuff that he
yeah,
did.
so for your dad, who started off with construction's not a right, women shouldn't be in construction, to sort of being an advocate, support, right, doing all the things to sort of help you be successful, probably seen and unseen in
Yep.
certain circumstances. What can because a 1 in 10 industry is hard. You go out onto a construction site and it's not 1 in 10, it's probably 1 in 20
Yeah.
are women. So what is it that men can do to
Mhm.
be better allies to women in construction, whether that's on the construction site, in the office, in organizations?
Yep. Before I leave my dad, I do want to answer that. I just want to say, I think I knew milestones in my time working with my dad. First was construction's no place for a woman. And then, probably 10 or 15 years later, it became, she's the son I never had, which I never liked. And I would say, ew, stop that. I'm not, he would say that to other people, she's my son. And I'd be like, absolutely not. Right. This is the wonkiness of even the mentality. And then finally, to the end, she stepped into my shoes. And that was the last thing he would tell others. And that's how I knew I was kind of doing a good job by what he was saying to others. So you were saying what would be best to kind of remove barriers? Is that what
Or
you
just
saying?
in terms of you because your dad made that shift to
Yeah.
being an advocate and an ally.
Yep.
We are certainly not seeing that in a wholesale way across the industry.
Yes.
Right? You and I probably are both old enough to remember when communication style of a foreman or a superintendent on a job site was based
Yeah.
on volume and the number of four-letter words they used, right?
Yes.
Which is not necessarily the case anymore. But what are some of the things that because we hopefully some of those old school attitudes are starting to fade. They're not gone. They're starting to fade a little bit. What can the other 90% do to be a little bit more supportive, to understand what some of those unique challenges are, and where we can maybe make headway for more women to come into the industry.
Right. So, I think there's a lot of things. First of all, we can't change an industry without the men coming along, right? We need men in the room. And what I find, even with a lot of our pro women advocacy organizations, is we can't be in an echo chamber, right? We have to have the men in the room too. And this is something that I speak about quite a bit. I'm invited into larger companies to just come in and talk to the women or talk to their employee resource groups about what can be done. And I think it starts at a very young age. I'll get very philosophical with you because and there are things that we can do, right now. I'm up on the board of ACE Mentor. ACE is a great kind of portal of entry for girls and boys to see the industry. It is from a high school standpoint, and get them involved in STEAM and STEM, and especially for the females. It is also a great way for girls to see women in the industry, right? If you can't see it, you can't be it, and so it's important for girls to see women in kind of leadership positions or just positions within the industry. We also have to, on a very young age, I'm getting really philosophical, is understand how we can talk and work with one another. There are differences, and it's okay. It's okay. We're not the same. The worst thing, there was a stint that I did probably when I was maybe 23. I think I spent a whole year wearing very boxy suits because I just wanted to cover up, change, not show that I was a woman. And that was crazy. You know how I dress now. I'm usually not in a sweatshirt, but it's okay to embrace when we
Sure.
need to do that. So there's a perception, I think that there is a perception out there, and it's still prevalent to this day, that women might be weaker, or perhaps they can't work the rigors of a construction site, or even supervise a construction site. And from the women that I've had a real benefit working with, and we are a majority female firm. and we are a majority minority firm. So both on both of those, and it's not something that's done with intentionality. I think, oh, I guess maybe it is subconsciously, but it just happens that way. I think we have to to create an environment, it's got to be one where everyone has an equal voice in the room. And that's actually our greatest strength. I think that's women's greatest strength, is actually building consensus and voice. Uh, it's also strategically a phenomenal way to win work, right? So it's not just doing the work, it's also winning the work and looking like your clients. And I've seen such a transformation in the 33 decades that I've been working. There are more women on the other side of the table now making decisions and being in leadership positions. So it's a great strategic way to win work, but also have that kind of diversity of thought in the room. I'm finding, so allowing women in the room to make those kind of decisions, it seems so simple, um, but it's still not there, not completely. I
Mhm.
can tell you, Michael, I've seen more probably in the last 10 years, definitely in the last 5 years. In New York City, um, a majority, maybe not a majority, a lot of like increasing, might be a majority of business development positions within the major construction firms in New York City are run by women now. The business development
Mhm.
um, divisions. In addition, I'm finding that more women are leading up business sectors within large construction firms. I'm talking Turner, I'm talking Skanska, like these behemoths that have been around
Sure.
forever, AECOM, like all of the big ones have women in senior leadership roles. And so it's making sure that there's a pathway up the chain too, that there's not um that we encourage women to stay in the construction trades, move into, or if they're on a parallel track, into the professional side of construction, to be able to be successful. I think the whole COVID pandemic has actually helped, because we've seen the ability to, in many ways, have a hybrid, support a hybrid kind of setting. And we'll get into, if you wish, some of the inherent barriers as it relates to work-life balance, because those are
Yeah.
real for women.
And I think part of what you're touching on with some of the larger firms is they are they are large businesses that happen to do construction,
Right.
as opposed to, right, they're a contractor, and it turns into a business, right? So
Correct.
the
Correct.
and I, from my experience, I worked for consulting engineering firms. We were managing hundreds of millions of dollars of construction, and there was no sense of business ownership, right? There was no sense of having people who understood business managing the business, as opposed to the folks who were out in the field managing the construction.
That's a great
Um,
point.
so the ability for women to um, take that skill set that they have, an interest in business, whether it applies to construction or manufacturing or whatever else it may be, right? The skill set is the skill set, and the ability to come up from the bottom and then blossom into those kinds of roles is really um, an interesting dynamic that we probably should be fostering a little bit more.
And I think that's where it has to happen. I kind of started off by saying at a younger age, it's got to be. I mean, I'd love it. The Department of Design and Construction was doing a program for STEAM, uh, and it was dealing with middle schoolers. I mean, it can't be early enough. I know, as 8-year-old Elizabeth, right? I was on construction sites,
Mm-hmm.
and so I can't say that that's great for everybody, because an 8-year-old should not be probably on a construction site, to be honest with you. And I'm not sure if owners would appreciate that now. But
Yeah.
if I wasn't exposed to it, had I gone to work for Aetna, I'd probably be in a bond underwrite, still in on the professional side, on the support side, but not into construction.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take you back to the philosophical perspective, right?
Yeah.
So philosophically, um, how do we start to change that attitude, right? Because so I've got a 23-year-old daughter who was a top math student in high school. And by the time she got to college, she wanted nothing to do with math anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we start to keep girls on that track where they can see there's opportunity, they can be encouraged, they can, right? Because STEAM is very wide ranging, right? It's not
Yes.
just construction, right? My career, I bounced from doing transportation planning to consulting engineering to construction management to to all kinds of things,
Yep.
right? All in and around the construction, architecture, engineering world. So how do we keep them on the path, keep them on that path before they get naturally sort of sidetracked from considering it as not as an option?
Yeah, so I think on from a young age, obviously exposure to the industry because there's not a lot of pathways, right? We've gone away from BOCES schools and trade schools in the K through 12. Um, I think we're seeing a shift a little bit back towards that kind of mentality. God, thank God, home ec is no longer a required subject. I don't think it is anyway for girls. So
But wood shop should be
but woodshop should be, absolutely. Woodshop
for
should
for
be.
for for every kid.
I agree. I agree. They should absolutely. By the way, home ec should be for every kid too, right? Everyone should know how to cook and whatever and
Yeah,
sew a button. But exposure to the industry. I find this generation that's coming in and be interesting, if you have the same perspective um, that they want to feel that they're making a difference. They're contributing in some way. And I know that that's what hooked me into the construction industry, right? What you build when you're changing the world around you, that is something that's pretty powerful. And that's transferable. You can take that anywhere you want, right? It's not in New York. You can go down anywhere you want to go. You can take those kind of skills, but in a deeper way, it's also great careers. You can raise a family on many salaries within our construction industry, if not most, right?
yeah,
Maybe not if you're living in New York City proper, but you can raise a family and you can have a single income household and raise a family. So when I talk to young girls about coming into the industry and young boys too, because I'm all about that kind of equality, is you can have a career that's meaningful, that you are literally changing the world. You're changing the landscape, the cityscape, whatever you want to call it, of the world. Make a great salary if you work hard, and you can raise a family and come to prominence within a career, and that career can take you in so many different ways, right? My father started as a carpenter, a uni carpenter. He ended up owning a business. I started as a business student. Now our company is more professional services, right?
yeah,
Now, and I advocate and give back on the board seats on which I sit. But until we show girls, especially women, that they have a seat at the table, I think they have to feel that they belong. And it's hard to feel like you belong when you're 1 in 10. So we have to be intentional about ensuring that they have a voice and a seat at the table. And we can achieve that through intentionality, from the top of a business, the leadership coming on down. It could be, listen, we're going to be taking interns. So let's make sure, let's do metrics to our interns, and let's make sure there's this many people of color, this many women. It really does work when you remove some of those traditional barriers of internships. Internships are a great pathway in. We've got the females going into engineering and architecture, they're there. They're coming in and they're creating the pipeline. They are often getting off track once they come out. And it's probably because this is a pretty intimidating industry to be in. And so that's where I'm saying have a seat at the table,
Yeah.
have a voice, maybe even a mentor within firms. I hate always saying having a mentor because I've found that my best mentoring and being mentored relationships came organically. It wasn't set up. Those
Right.
that were artificially put together, it didn't work for me. I don't think it worked for the mentor. And so I'm often asked, will you mentor me? And I don't know. I've got the art of saying no down pretty well. Like can we talk a little bit more? Let's talk about what your needs are. Because I don't know
Sure.
if I'm the right mentor for everybody either, right? And if not, then I can maybe put you in touch with somebody. But if we have intentionality within companies where you have male and female mentors really looking out for the new class that's coming in, the new
Yep.
interns that are coming in, I think to create that sense of belonging at the same time we're celebrating our differences, right? So I love employee resource groups. I think it's great, though we have to be careful that we don't silo ourselves
So,
out of
so
belonging.
yeah. So I'm gonna grab the third rail a little bit, which is right. You come from it from a business owner perspective, right?
Yes,
There's lots of large organizations that are, you know, probably barriers for women in larger organizations. There's inherent biases and
right.
everything else. And now you're starting to see the backlash against DEI initiatives,
Yes.
which perhaps are well intentioned. Um, right? I'm not saying that we should just they should go by the wayside, but where does some of those DEI initiatives start to actually make things more difficult for women in the organizations?
Um, where do I start? So, I think by and large, DEI is such an integral part of of our calculus to creating equality. By the way, creating better businesses, right? It's because economically it comes down to how are we, how our business is better, right? So diversity of thought obviously is a big part of that. I'm afraid for this push towards kind of doing away with diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives because I think I see kind of boots on the grounds that it's still not there. There's still these kind of silent barriers to for people to not only succeed and move up in the ranks of their firms. So I believe in intentionality, be it legislative or organic or intentional with corporate policies, especially in the private sector. When you asked me that question about how has it kind of come back, I think about I had this really it's not construction, but it's a woman in a traditionally male dominated industry, and I was I was part of the transition team for the current mayor in New York City, and I had this really unique experience of being asked to evaluate the police commissioner candidates for the first police commissioner of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And there was intentionality there. This is leadership there, right? There was a decision made, a calculus made, I believe, or a push or a goal, aspirational, whatever, of Mayor Eric Adams to have the first female police commissioner in New York City's history. And I remember in interviewing the candidates, having this great opportunity to listen at where we were going to take the city, from a public safety standpoint. And so many of the women said, I'm so sorry. I regret, or I wish there wasn't a request for it to be female because I believe I'm here on my own merit. And the female saying it should be a woman is this asterisk, is like almost an asterisk to my achievement of this position. And I really thought on that, because that's not how it should be. So I believe in the leadership and intentionality and setting of goals, aspirational and otherwise. But it shouldn't be at the expense of having somebody feel that they wouldn't have gotten it, uh, in a situation that was created where it was up against a male, too. So I
Do you
think there is
think,
a danger
yeah.
for
So
going overboard.
yeah. So do you think within our industry,
Uh-huh.
does that start to put a little bit of a target on a woman's back, and start to erode their confidence in their own ability?
I think it could. I think it could. So, we're women in the industry, and then we're also women business owners in the industry, right? So I think making sure that you're in a competitive environment, competing against other like-sized businesses, with the same constraints. I think that's a real good thing. Um, if there is intentionality with regard to today, we're going to hire 5 women, 2 men, and 3 people of color, then perhaps that is a bridge too far. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think any candidate would want to be selected based upon their own unique qualifications. And you don't want to have that asterisk, right? I'm also a
Right.
female. You don't want to have that asterisk. I'm not sure if I'm seeing that necessarily in industries where they're saying let's let's break it down so much, like that. Um, I think there's aspirational goals within organizations. I'm not sure if I'm there yet, Michael, that there are people in jobs that they are not necessarily, or feel that they're not necessarily qualified for. I think for women, it's a hard thing to feel that you're qualified, right? We're just built differently. We operate differently. And so we're not the ones that kind of shout from the rooftops when we think we're doing a good job. We don't ask for accolades, or a pat on the back. We don't do enough to ask for increases and raises. We start off on a salary level. It's just fact, lower than males.
Yep.
And then if you're in the construction industry, you typically go up by percentages unless you change into a totally different job, which is not very easy to do. You're always going to be
Yep.
low, right?
Sure. You're always going to lag.
You're always going to lag. And so, um, I think that's I think that's something where we can look at it, right? And by changing those kind of things, those measures, those metrics, especially with regard to salary and a seat at the table, and project management and such a voice, an equal voice at the table. So I have to tell you that it's something when I hire, especially females, I don't have to worry about it with the males because they will tell me they're worth 10 times what they really are, in my opinion. With females that I have coming in, especially young women, I always encourage them to dig in deep within themselves and tell me, what do you think you can do? Where
Yep.
do you think where do you think your confidence lies? Because we have to be tough, all of us in this industry, in construction.
Sure.
There's a toughness that is required that is not necessarily intuitive, to women.
And
And,
I'll tell you from my experience,
yeah.
having been on the hiring side and having put teams together, um, and working for agencies, there were times when I had to fight to get salaries for women who I wanted to hire that were comparable to the men, right? The skill set were the same,
Yeah.
years of experience were the same, and there would be a natural inclination of like, you want to pay how much? And I
Right.
would be like, this is the scale. This is what we're paying. This is what the and it was interesting to see the pushback. This is on the from the agency side on bringing in just because they're women or women of color or right whatever it was an interesting dynamic to witness firsthand, and have to be the person who was like, no, 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 this is what we're going to pay because this is essentially pay equity, right? This is we're taking gender, we're taking race, we're taking everything off the table based on the qualifications. This is what the job pays,
You
and
know, I've had
and it,
such a great experience talking with so many people that are up and coming just routinely in our industry. And there's a very large construction firm in New York City, which will remain nameless. I had two female project managers, had a very large organization. There were two female project managers. And the president of the company decided to have the two female project managers compete against one another on their respective projects to get the next level position. And I remember talking to one of the project managers, and she was so conflicted about this because it seemed so wrong to her. And I said to her, it is. It is wrong. It's like, look, we've got this one slot. You two girls, you can't fight it out. Whoever's
yeah,
going to do the best on their project is going to be promoted. And she ended up quitting. And it was the best thing for her, because that was not a healthy environment to be in for her. It was not the right message that I think should be sent and seen to women especially. And the company is still around. They're doing okay. But I think that they're in the dark ages and will not be able to morph. And by the way, be competitive in this kind of new world where we have to show a diversity of project teams to be successful strategically.
yeah. And it's funny you talk about the dark ages, right? We are still there's still lots of folks in this industry who are still dark ages thinking, don't want to necessarily accept the neuroscience of women have a different skill set naturally, have right come with a much more consensus building, much more relationship building, much probably much more refined communication skills and such. And as an industry, we haven't necessarily recognized that there's an ability to take that and match it up with some of the other things that are happening in the industry to move organizations forward, right? So
Absolutely.
organizations need to be healthy. That dynamic that you're talking about, where pitting two female project managers against each other, I would venture to guess it's probably not a healthy organization for anybody,
Correct.
right? Not
Agreed.
not just for the women, but for anybody.
Agreed. Agreed. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I was approached about becoming the chair of the building congress, uh, I was approached by the current chair at the time, and he said to me, "Have you ever thought of being the chair of the building congress?" And I'm very much a straight shooter. I'm an open book, right? I found it served me well. And I said, "No, never thought about it." And he said, "How could you say that?" And I said, "Because I never thought about it. I've never thought of that as a realm of possibility, but you got me piqued now. You got my interest
Mm-hmm.
piqued. What are your thoughts?" And he said, "I want you to follow me and be the chair of the building congress. It is time. And you have all the right qualifications and criteria. I think you could really take us to new levels." And I said, it wasn't anything, Mike, that I ever dreamed of. I just never thought of it. And in retrospect, like that really should have been on my bucket list, right? That should have been on my pathway. I've always, I've felt included within the building Congress. My goodness, I was on their board for 20 years, right? Never thought about being a chair. Probably thought I was too small in terms of a business size, right? Because there's
Mhm.
such behemoths in the industry in New York. And I instantly said, I'm in. I'd love it. But let me work with you. Let me talk with you about what you've seen because I'd want to take this on in a real intentional way. And so I said to him, what have you not accomplished that you wished you did in your tenure? And he said, nope, not going to do it, not going to tell you because you need to come up with your own set of initiatives and objectives. And I thought that was so beautiful and so empowering as well, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, yeah, okay, I do need to come up with my own set of objectives and vision. And so he said, okay, this is going to be easy. You're going to skate right through. I'm picking you. You want to do this. I know you can do it. I'm going to make sure that you're successful. I'm going to be behind you all the way. And it didn't go down like that. So it wasn't as easy as he thought. One, two, three. It was not going to be that easy. All of a sudden, it was like, well, Elizabeth, we do want you, but you're going to have to talk to people. And I've never, Mike, ever ran for an elected position, wanted to get votes for something, never felt like I've had to do that. But for the first time, I had to. And I believed in the industry. I believe in the industry. I love advocating for it. I know I'm a good advocate. I know I've got a good voice. And I know I'm in rooms where that voice needs to be heard. I also know I represent a community that's often not represented. And so I was excited about that possibility. So I had to make the rounds. I had to talk with union heads. The nominating committee all wanted to talk with me. I got some feedback that I should update my website. Many said, gosh, we've known her for so long, but we don't know what she does. Like that was the whole part. And for me, it was a real moment of shining a light on myself. Like, okay, I'm ready for this, right? I can do this. There's trepidation, right? If you
Yep.
don't feel butterflies in your stomach, you're doing something wrong, right? You should always feel a little bit of ice, that ice pit in your stomach. Otherwise I think you're too complacent. I was feeling the ice, and I made it through. I made it through. Obviously, I got the votes that I needed. I didn't have to you know, do too much handshaking and baby kissing, but that's what I felt like it
Yeah.
was. And you know what? It was not if you were male, if I was a guy, it would have been just okay. It would have just gone right through.
And I think that what you're describing in that anecdote
Yeah.
is a microcosm for what women are facing within the industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm constantly reminded. I
Yeah.
truly am constantly reminded. I was at
Even 30 years after running around on a construction site with your dad.
even being the voice of the industry, right?
Yeah.
Going out and advocating up in Albany, down in DC, wanting to change our industry, bring innovation to it, bring funding to it. It was, yes, it was still, I'm always reminded of it. We had a luncheon, maybe a few months ago, and it was just a by the way, I was the second woman in building Congress history, first person of color. So I knew I was standing on some important shoulders,
Hmm.
men's shoulders, but I also knew that I would have people coming after me, and I wanted to leave the place in a better place. COVID hit, but we did. We actually put in some great practices that had to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it wasn't that long ago. It was a few months ago. And I was asked to come to a luncheon in honor of Dick Anderson, just celebrating him. He had his wife had recently had passed away before that, and he was feeling down, and they wanted to kind of all get together. And we go to a restaurant. I walk in, the only female. There's 19 men and me. And I just laugh and I laugh. I laugh out loud. And I actually share my thoughts with the guys that are in the room, the men that are in the room, because they need to know, like, this is weird, right? And we have a laugh about it,
Yeah,
but the reality is I have to call it out because I feel like it's incumbent upon me now, in my 50s to kind of call it out when I
yeah,
see that it doesn't feel right when it's not right.
yeah. Well, listen, this has been a great conversation, and I appreciate your time because I think that and you and I can have this conversation for
Oh,
for
forever.
another hour,
Yeah.
and we will have an opportunity. I will be in New York in the next couple months with some clients. I will make sure that we find some time to get together for a cup of coffee or lunch or something along the
And
way.
you could
But
bring your new book. I can't wait because I love
oh,
the
it's coming in the mail. It's
I
coming in the
love it.
mail. No
Perfect.
worries. So thank you. I appreciate your time. You've been very generous, and I will certainly keep you updated on what's going on.
Onward. And thank you for the work that you do, Michael, and shining a light.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Have a
Take
good
care.
one.
You
Yep.
too.
Bye bye.